In a recent interview, Mitt Romney, now the official Republican Party presidential nominee, was confronted with the possibility that there was political tampering along the lines of Casablanca with Ron Paul delegates at the Republican National Convention.
Really?
That's the comment that was made by our guest Ben Swann, anchorman at Cincinnati's Fox affiliate WXIX Fox 19 and host of the nationally popular Reality Check segment. Mr. Swann, welcome to the show.
Jerry, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
He had no idea that there was any possibility that anybody connected to his campaign would have anything to do with delegate tampering or an attempt to undermine any grassroots movement, much less the Ron Paul movement.
Well, I would assume that he would think he wasn't going to get a question about it, even if the suspicion was out there, and certainly not from a local affiliate reporter.
Now, part of the agreement that that you had or they had with you was that you would go through the pre-approved list of do's and don'ts, things you can and can't talk about, but you felt compelled to ask about the elephant in the room, so to speak, about what's going on with the disenfranchisement or the attempt to rewrite the rules to benefit not just Mitt Romney, but also the Republican power hierarchy going forward.
Well, what's interesting was when we had the interview, the rewriting of the rules had not even happened yet. We were just talking about the fact that the RNC was eliminating these delegates from the state of Maine, Louisiana, from Oregon, really from all over the country, Massachusetts. They were taking these delegates and systematically removing them and replacing them with pre-approved delegates who had not won, by the way, those positions as elected positions in any of the caucuses or state conventions. And so as this had happened, we were very concerned with the fact that the RNC the day before had simply ruled arbitrarily to unseat the entire Maine delegation, which we thought was not only was it egregious to do so, but quite frankly, there was absolutely no grounds under which this could happen. That's what we wanted to ask him about. I think he was surprised by the question, but what's more shocking to me was that as he's answering it, motion had already been set into place for the RNC to set up what they did at the convention, which is to rewrite the rules going forward in the future, where the nominee will now be able to pick and choose delegates and arbitrarily remove them. And again, this I should correct myself. It's not even the nominee, because anyone you remove prior to the convention is simply being removed by a candidate, not even the nominee himself.
Wow. Now, for those of you, I'm a Ron Paul supporter. I endorsed him back in December on the air. For those who say, well, like Rudy Giuliani, that Ron Paul is merely a kook and a cranky old man. Even if you're not a Ron Paul supporter, I think there would have to be some concern out there that regardless of who it is today that's perceived to be chaotic to the process or the power grab by any political party, there would be great concern that when it comes time for your guy or gal to be the person that you think should be the voice of Republican Party 2.0 or 3.0 or Democrat Party 2.0 or 3.0, that your voice might be silenced because their voice might be silenced through this process of this power grab by a seemingly more integrated power structure of a good old boy and gal network.
What you got to watch out for is the fact that whether you're in the Tea Party, and a lot of Tea Party groups are very angry about this rule change. And look, if you watch convention video, and we're going to be doing this, a full story on this tomorrow night, a reality check look at this, including video from the convention of how this played out. When that RNC rule was supposed to be voted on, there were numerous delegations, not just Ron Paul supporters, but numerous delegations that were on their way to fight it, including the Virginia delegation with a man by the name of Morton Blackwell who was on that bus. Now, for GOP insiders might recognize that name. Morton Blackwell has been on the Rules Committee and helping write the rules of the Republican Party since the mid-'70s and is very influential in the inner workings of the GOP. He was adamantly opposed to this. He's not a Ron Paul guy, but he's adamantly opposed to this because he says it destroys the grassroots. On his way, Jerry, to the convention that day, the bus has to pick up the delegates and take them down there. The Virginia bus reportedly circled the convention hall 3 times. The driver left without letting anyone off the bus, came back, circled around again, finally let them off. The Virginia, the Rhode Island, and the Iowa delegations, from what I have been told, missed the vote. And when the vote was taken, and it was Speaker of the House John Boehner, who has his district right here where we are in near Cincinnati. He was the one who actually called the vote as the chair. When the vote is called, and there's plenty of audio of this, you can hear about half the room approves, the other half of the room disapproves, and he says, in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. There is no way, when you listen to this audio, that you could have determined from standing there and listening to how many people shouted aye and how many shouted no. There were so many voices. There is no way that they were able to adequately determine that the ayes had it. So this thing was rammed down the throats of Republicans, regardless of whether you're a Ron Paul or Rick Perry, a Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney supporter. What they did yesterday was to essentially decide that grassroots, that Tea Party, that Liberty candidates have no say, and that party bosses will determine the future of the Republican Party. One delegate told me, they said, listen, if I wanted to be in a party where voters have no say, where party bosses make all the decision, and where they allow no dissension, I go become a Democrat. Because the Republican Party is supposed to be different, and it looks more like the DNC right now, they said, than the RNC.
Isn't that kind of along the lines of what the accusations that the Republicans made against the Democrats with regard to Obamacare, that this was rammed down the throats of the American people without time to debate or issue or to add amendments, debate amendments, to actually take the time to read the bill and to have some time to have it vetted by the American people before it went to a vote? And now they seem to be using the same tactics that the Democrats embraced with regard to ramming through Obamacare.
What you really have to watch out for is I agree, I think that Republicans, especially Tea Party folks and liberty-minded folks who are in the Republican Party, need to watch out when they say, and many of them have complained this, their biggest frustration with President Obama is they feel that he is a Democrat who wants strong, centralized federal government and to remove states' rights. Now consider this. They're looking at Mitt Romney as their candidate because they want someone who will not push a strong, centralized federal government. And yet the Romney campaign just did that in the Republican Party. Essentially said, we're taking out the rights of states to run their own delegates the way that they do, to have their own rules. We're removing states' rights. And instead, they said, we're going to centralize all the power in the Republican Party in the hands of a few candidates and party bosses who will decide ultimately who gets to go and cast a vote. Remember, the RNC is set up, the Republican National Convention is set up so that delegates are supposed to debate and decide at the convention who the nominee will be. We're not supposed to do this months in advance and then make the RNC into a coronation of King Romney or whoever the case might be. It's not supposed to be a coronation, it's supposed to be a convention, and that is now officially over with.
Let me ask you this, Ben Swann, anchorman at the Cincinnati Fox affiliate, Fox 19 WXIX. By the way, Facebook.com/Ben Swann Reality Check, over 1.3 million views there. To the question or the statement that I get from people who say you're not helping. You're not helping Mitt Romney. You're not helping the Romney-Ryan ticket. You seem to be working against what needs to happen, which is the defeat of the socialist president on November 6th.
Well, there's a great line in the movie The Patriot. We just saw it this past weekend, and Mel Gibson's character, who plays Benjamin Martin, says when he's being asked to go to war, and someone's complaining and says, "We have to do what we can to fight this tyrant 3,000 miles away," and he says, "Why should I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away?" In some cases, I would say a lot of the folks who talk to me about this, and a lot of these folks who are strong conservatives and liberty movement people will say, why should we trade President Obama, who believes in, again, this strong centralized federal government, who wants to dictate everything in your life, who pushed through this Obamacare that we didn't want, and trade him for a strong centralized, they believe, liberal Republican who created the blueprint for Obamacare, who himself was pro-choice before he was pro-life, and who they believe really is essentially the same person. He has the same contributors on Wall Street. He has the same backing as President Obama. And so they don't see it as choosing, one lesser qualified candidate, but to defeat a terrible candidate. They see them now as essentially the same candidate wearing two different labels. One's wearing a Republican label, one's wearing a Democrat label, and what they don't see changing is they don't see our debt problem changing, they don't see our war problem changing, they don't see any of the issues that are important to these people, getting control of our spending, getting control of the healthcare issue, really changing under a President Romney versus a President Obama. So I don't really think, for folks, and I hear it a lot from people too, you should stop criticizing Mitt Romney. Our job isn't to criticize Romney, but it is to hold him accountable for his record and for what he says. And at the end of the day, if his record is not pleasing to people, that's not my problem. Maybe that's the problem with their candidate.
Ben Swann is a Edward R. Murrow Award recipient, also the winner of 2 Emmys at the very tender age of 33, because at 56, everybody seems to be younger than me these days, Ben. With regard to the debt clock, that there's 2 of them. There's the debt clock, and then there's the debt since the start of the Republican convention. Where was the concern of these same deficit hawks when George Bush was doubling the national debt from $5 to $10 trillion? It's
a very good question. The other question is, how does someone like Congressman Paul Ryan, who is a favorite among a lot of conservatives, stand up on that stage and give his acceptance speech today? I think he's doing it at 10 o'clock tonight Eastern Time. But how does he stand up on that stage and give that speech with the debt clock running when he himself voted for the president's stimulus? He voted for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and not just in the first place, but the continuation of those wars. He voted for the auto industry bailout. He voted for the airline industry bailout. He voted for Medicare Part D. So this idea that Obama has destroyed the country with his spending, it seems almost hypocritical to run this clock instead of standing up and saying, actually, folks, the first thing I want to say is I need to ask for forgiveness for the fact that I'm part of the problem up there. I'm sure he won't say that. In fact, not only did Ryan accept, the vote for all those things, he has blasted President Obama over his stimulus, and yet requested stimulus money into his district repeatedly as a congressman. So, it's one thing to stand up and say, look what this president's done, but you're absolutely right. When President Bush was racking up money and spending it like it was going out of style, Republicans didn't have a problem. And I think for a lot of conservatives and liberty folks, they're very concerned that when the Romney-Ryan ticket, if it were to get into the White House, would continue that spending and essentially saying, our spending is somehow righteous, and their spending is somehow unrighteous. And I think that turns a lot of people off.
And I think to be honest with themselves would help them to do a better job of not finding themselves, I'm talking about the Republican Party, not finding themselves in another place in time where they have to say just one more time, give us Johnny McAmnesty 2.0. Just one more time, give us Bob Dole. Just give us Mitt Romney this time, and next time we'll make sure that we have a true constitutional conservative, someone who's committed to fiscal discipline, smaller government, more libertarian principles, auditing the Fed, embracing a lot of what it is that they rejected of Ron Paul. Maybe we wouldn't have to get back to the choice of the lesser of two evils. Maybe we could actually be excited about voting for someone rather than hoping to defeat someone else.
Well, that essentially is a strategy on both sides, and that's what's truly tragic about this election, is that the majority of people who will vote for Governor Romney are saying they're casting a vote against President Obama, and vice versa. Very few people are voting for President Obama this time around. They did the last time they voted for him, and they were voting for history. This time, the entire Obama campaign has been based upon, we want to vote against Mitt Romney. You got to vote against the challenger. And how rare is that in political history, that an incumbent is asking you to vote against the challenger? So it's kind of sad that we're at this place in American history and in American politics, but maybe it's also a positive. Maybe it shows us that people are really fed up and they're not buying into what politicians are telling them anymore. I think that's why we're seeing this incredible rise in the liberty movement right now, and it really is stunning. If people were unaware, and I think a lot of Americans were unaware of who Ron Paul was, Congressman Paul was, in 2008, and many Americans were, he was the guy at the end of the stage that they really wouldn't let talk. And in 2012, every person in this country knows that name now, and it's not because Ron Paul changed. It's not because anything changed. It's because the liberty movement has grown at such a stunning, astronomical pace.
A big part of that growth attributed to you, Ben Swann. Thank you, sir. He's with the Fox affiliate, WXIX Fox 19 out of Cincinnati. Go to Facebook.com/Ben Swann Reality Check. Look forward to that next reality check, Mr. Swann. Appreciate your time.
Jerry, thank you for having me on.
We'll do it again. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Jerry Doyle Show.